Gentlemen, sometimes it has to be this over so you can later be that back. But man, it really feels kind of over right now. Welcome back to Motorsport 101, I guess. Welcome all to us having the worst prediction season of the short history of the show, where all three of us are going down with this ship.
Listen, if nothing else, I still have a chance. I predicted 3 Moto2 graduates. I'm looking good on those odds. I like where I'm going with this.
Problem is, Dre, is that you predicted the over on Ducati wins, so this is just going to be a bloody stalemate.
Yeah, I was out after round 5. I mean, shit. Like, amount of Ducati wins, yet 1. Yeah, great. As you do. Oh, let me introduce the show while I'm here. Hi, everybody. I'm Dre Harrison. Welcome to episode 653 of Motorsport 101. Glad you could join us, and I hope you're not feeling too sad after Cam's wildly optimistic intro. I know, it's quite unlike what he usually does on this show. His Boston Celtics are also out of the NBA playoffs, and his Red Sox suck. So right now, we're all going through it sports-wise right now.
The Red Sox, the Bruins also got punked in the playoffs. The Fleet got punked in the playoffs.
We're all going through it.
It is all going through it, except for the Braves fan in the corner, who will eventually bite down into that razor blade in the cake.
It's in there somewhere. He just hasn't found it yet. Lakers
doesn't matter. We're a wagon.
Dodgers
best team in the league. Best team in baseball.
The Braves are actually kind of a wagon right now.
This is without all of our pitchers being at full health. This is with one guy getting popped for a second PED suspension for being a silly Billy. This is with Ronald Acuna Jr. having a hamstring tear. But to give you a little bit of context, I'm RJ O'Connell, by the way. To give you a bit of context of what Cam and Dre were talking about earlier. So, before every season, we do our predictions at the end of every season preview. For MotoGP, we pick champion, runner-up. We had the over-under wins from Ducati, who've been the dominant manufacturer. We picked it, would anybody win outside of Ducati and Aprilia? And we picked the number of Moto2 graduates. All of us picked Marc Marquez as champion.
Whoops.
He's just suffered an injury that will keep him on the shelf for the French Grand Prix, potentially the Catalan Grand Prix. Like with the Catalan Grand Prix, it is not looking good for his title defense. So, bam, off the board. Second of the rider standings, Francesco Bagnaia. We'll talk about that in a bit.
No.
But he's not.
No.
He is not that expectations.
Gotta say, in hindsight, what the fuck were we all thinking on that one?
We were thinking, we drank the Kool-Aid. We all took everyone's word for it that, Bagnaia feels much better on the bike. And no, it's been shit.
Bam,
I mean, we just ignore the Aprilia going on an all-time tear by their standards. Like, no, we don't believe it.
And to that point, a win outside of Ducati and Aprilia, it's looking like we could. I mean, if we picked a win outside of Aprilia, we might have cashed in altogether. But all of us said, yes, KTM, Honda, or Yamaha could win a race.
Well, I was not saying that for Yamaha, my friend.
Well, Pedro's not a million miles away. There's hope.
But he rides for KTM for another year.
The running gag with Pedro is that everyone's going to get their first win before him. On the plus side, it's looking like we're probably going to get an Aprilia triple crown before Embiid conference finals. So
that's a plus, I guess. Yeah, we're going to try and make sense of this French Grand Prix. This was a very volatile weekend where, let's put it to you this way. For those who don't know, I am the social media admin for Crash.net's MotoGP coverage. You haven't lived until you've had to pick through frame by frame the shot where Marc Marquez is most upside down for a social post. That's what happened. I'm not exaggerating.
The record scratch freeze frame. Yep, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got into this situation type of crash.
Does anybody remember Jorge Lorenzo's highside at Laguna Seca in 2008?
I do.
Yeah.
I actually think Mark might have got more air, which is slightly horrifying.
Dude, it felt like Jorge Lorenzo was like having... Jorge Lorenzo was like having a... Lorenzo was having a weekend, like a career-ending crash every weekend in his rookie year, it seemed.
He
Figured
nearly
it out eventually.
he nearly retired at the end of 2009 because he was going through that much debilitating stress from how much he didn't like MotoGP to start off with. He's the reason why we had a rookie can't ride a factory bike rule in MotoGP until 2013 when Marc Marquez came along. It's amazing how these things turn out. Yeah, that was the rule. The funny thing is, I only got reminded of this rule because Scott Redding went on one of his usual radio-based tirades on a podcast saying that, it's all just Spanish and Italian riders now. There's no British talent coming through. Why is Alex Rins still in MotoGP? And I'm just like, Alex Rins looking at him probably like Curtis Jackson going, what do you mean fuck me for? Essentially.
I feel bad for you. I don't think about you at all type energy.
It's exactly. Anyway, that's famous no-time World Superbike champion Scott Redding there.
I was going to say, Alex Rins, even in diminished form, is still 10 times the rider Redding ever was.
Precisely. So we'll try and make sense of Marc Marquez and the sprint crash scene around the world. And, well, Jorge Martin throwing it back to a couple of years ago, because for the first time in 589 days, he is a Grand Prix winner again. And, hey, maybe now the favorite for the World Championship? Let's break it all down over the next hour or so in what was a hectic French Grand Prix. But first, places you can find us real quick. We are on youtube.com/motorsport101 for full episodes on there. We're on facebook.com/motorsport101. We're on Twitter at motorsport_101. And if you want to follow us on Blue Sky personally, you can at Dre Harrison and RJ O'Connell at bsky.social, cbuckley917 for Cam. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok if you want to see exclusive video highlights of the show. You can do so over there in Motorsport101 Pod on Instagram, M101_podcast on TikTok, and you can follow us on our website as well for full written content reviewing all the weekend's action at motorsport101.com/blog if you want the written section over there. And of course, if you really, really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our content. You can upgrade to the $10 tier to listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Kira, Jason, and goes up to doing so right now. Also, I may or may not have put a sneak peek of a new upcoming one-off special coming to the blog very, very soon if you're a Patreon backer at any level. Just a little, draft of something, so to speak. More on that in the coming days. No better time to back than now. Oh, well, by the way, if you back us for a full year financially, you can do it at 30% off. If you're the sort of person who likes to hit these things and pay in bulk, you can at a discounted price, because what's not to love about a discount? So, without further ado, let's get into reviewing the French Grand Prix.
Incoming.
That's right, Dre. I mean, we alluded to it at the top, the Marc Marquez injury. This was the first of two big stories to come out of this weekend's French Grand Prix. So let's get Saturday out of the way first. And after a bizarre qualifying session where Marc Marquez had to come out of Q1 and broke the lap record in doing so, he fell from second on the grid in the sprint to seventh before crashing out in spectacular fashion. Again, as we alluded to, Dre had to find the most upside down of him frame that he could for social media. He crashed at the final corner of the penultimate lap of the race, just within sight of the checkered flag, and Marquez broke his metatarsal in his foot and ruled him out of the Grand Prix on Sunday. He's also been ruled out for the Catalonia Grand Prix at Barcelona this coming weekend. Marquez then revealed that his shoulder was more hurt than he'd let on after his crash at Jerez. It was a crash that broke two screws from a shoulder surgery in 2019, and as a result, the said broken screw was now scratching against the radial nerve in his arm, causing numbness and discomfort, and that crash at Le Mans, as said, Marquez is out for Barcelona. He could return for Mugello at the end of the month. Ducati will not run a replacement rider at this time. I mean, it's never a dull moment for Marc Marquez, is it, Dre?
No. What's the phrase that Cam's come up with lately? Like, "I'll follow Marquez into hell, but I wish he'd stop going there."
That's been the story since 2020.
It really has, hasn't it? It's like there is never like Marc Marquez is many things. And to borrow another reference, I told this one to Cam before. If you ever watched Secret Base's History of the Seattle Mariners video, you'll know there's a key flashpoint in Ken Griffey Jr.'s career, the moment where he runs into the wall to make a leaping catch and breaks his wrist. And there's a great line in there from John Boyes where he says, Marc Marquez can only be great.
This is what I've been saying. I've said this many times, but it's great to let everybody know where that comes from.
Yes. Marc Marquez is many things, but he is never dull. And this was a revelation hearing this come out over the weekend. And there's a very poignant interview that Mark does with the very good Jack Appleyard on MotoGP.com. He's their roving pit reporter that they have on the broadcast. And Jack got a few words of him in before he was literally about to leave the track on Sunday morning and head for the first flight back to Madrid to get operated on that same afternoon. And the line I believe he said that hit me the hardest was, "I didn't want to cry in front of the microphone." He was a lot more hurt than I think all of us were letting on. We talked about this to a degree before, but we didn't really know the full extent of to what had happened. That whole revelation about the scratching of the radial nerve, the 2 broken screws we were talking about, not even his own team knew about that until Saturday afternoon. In fact, as we were recording this podcast the same day, Ducati released the latest episode of their in-house excellent video series, Inside Ducati. And there is Mark having an emotional breakdown in front of Marco Rigamonti, his crew chief, Gigi Dall'Igna, Davide Tardozzi, all the key players inside Ducati. And he's in tears having to explain that he was in worse shape than he was letting on. That basically he was riding with 2 broken screws in his 2019 surgery and basically scratching his radial nerve. For a little bit of extra context behind this, now that we know more, basically the crash, that was a big crash. That was over 100 miles an hour when he binned it. Basically what had happened is, like I said, he had broken 2 screws in his shoulder from his 2019 shoulder surgery, and it was scratching against his radial nerve. The problem was that Mark didn't really notice at first, because walking around, doing average human being things, nothing was happening. When he was riding a motocross bike or when he was in the gym training, nothing was happening. It was normal. He was seeing his gym numbers go up, apparently. He was like, "Oh, this is great. The shoulder's feeling better." But every time he was assuming the actual riding position to ride a MotoGP bike, this radial nerve scratch was happening. So
it was press up against his radial nerve and basically to have his arm start spasming out and going numb.
Something you really can't afford to have happening is losing control of your arm when you're riding a 330 brake horsepower blunderbuss. And that's exactly how that crash at Le Mans happened. He lost the feeling in his arm as he was hitting the brakes for the penultimate corner at Le Mans, which is a very slow second gear double right-hander apex sequence. Put the rear wheel on the paint and on the curb on the outside, lost control of the rear of the bike, and it launched him into a full-blown upside-down highside, because Mark was still holding on to the bike as this was happening in real time, and broke his metatarsal in his toe on the way down. So that's what led to the broken bone. That's what led to the being declared unfit, and that's when we found out he was always planning to have a surgery on his shoulder after Barcelona anyway. It got brought forward as a result of this crash.
Yeah, had both surgeries on the same day. And for context, Mark expanded on it a little bit, that this was lasting damage from the Indonesia 2025 crash that we never really realized until now. And even beyond the ligament damage and the repair that was done there, that was initially kind of played down, and then they actually went towards surgery and repaired the ligament, and he was building up strength from that. Well, he's had no strength in the arm anyway because of the nerve issue. I suppose it's probably better to know now than not, because now we know what's been going on. Because there's a couple of these crashes this year have just been like, well, what just happened there?
Yeah,
It doesn't look like he does anything wrong, and the bike just spits him out.
Yeah,
it looks like, the Marc Marquez that was, constantly dropping the bike, the tired meme that was just like, I don't know anything about this Marc Marquez guy, but every time I see him, he's always crashing his bike. Like, it looked like that version of Marc during the depths of those last years with Honda had come back for some reason. Yeah, that sheds a lot more light on things.
Yeah. And I mean, the broken metatarsal, that's something that will, that's probably the more minor story in this.
Yeah.
The much bigger thing becomes, well, what does Marc actually look like when he does come back? Because that was initially, I mean, I said that 3 episodes ago. We were talking about, well, what does it look like when he's got a couple more weeks on the arm via training when we go to Jerez? It'll look better, but he still had one of those crashes. It didn't touch on it much in the description of this. The effect of this is that Marc's pace was quite random. He obliterated the lap record around the Bugatti circuit in Q1 and then never got close again because his arm was acting up.
Yeah, there's a great moment. I mean, to put it into context, yeah, that was a lap that was about half a tenth faster than Fabio Quartararo's 2025 pole lap. That it was the lap record, and that was a stunning lap when Fabio set that one. That was a complete shocker when Fabio put that one down last year. It was one of the holy shit laps of the year, is what I would describe it as. Marc broke that run. He got through to Q2 automatically. No one in Q2 got within 4/10 of that lap that Marc set in Q1, including himself. And there's a genuinely wild moment where Marc's, obviously, Francesco Bagnaia got pole in the end by 12 thousandths over Marc. It was an incredibly close qualifying session. 3/10 covered the top 10. It was that close. It was the second closest Q2 ever in MotoGP. And as he's discussing it with Bagnaia, like you may have seen if you watch on TNT Sports, Natalie Quirk, who does a great job interviewing there over in TNT, called Marc over for the usual Parc Ferme top 3 interview. And Marc said to her while laughing, I have no idea how I'm so fast. This is a problem. And then 3 hours later, when the sprint race happens, he's getting once over in the medical center, figuring out he's broken a bone in his foot, and is now out for the next 2 races. For me, this is, I think, a bit of a good news, bad news situation. The good news is you can now clear up this. Hopefully, will clear up the problem, and we should be able to see Marc something like 100% now properly. That we've gotten this out of the way early enough, and that they can now focus on getting Marc up to 100%. Hopefully, there's no lasting damage to that radial nerve. We don't know for sure. But there's the plaster on the.
Not.
Yeah.
You would think not, given that. Yeah. Like, given that the only time he has the issue is unfortunately when he's doing his job on top of a Desmos Adichie GP. You would think if nothing is touching that nerve, then he should be all right, but we're just going to have to wait and see.
That's the good news.
Yeah.
The bad news is his championship is probably over, in the sense
probably.
of he's now 70 points behind Jorge Martin.
71 points back. 7th in the standings. He's not going to score any points the next round. Who knows what'll happen at Mugello? That could be, 3 straight did not starts, withdrawals, no points on the board at all. While we were tired in the Grand Prix in Jerez, he still got a couple points out of his weekend and won the sprint, didn't he? In Jerez,
yeah, he did.
Yeah,
that pouring rain shower at the very end of the race.
That was still 12
you
points.
face the possibility of 2, maybe 3 Grand Prix weekends without points, all the while Marco Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin look like an absolute wagon out there.
It's over. There's a good chance he's going to be more than 100 points off the championship lead by the time we get through Barcelona. He's going to be praying his brother limits the damage this weekend, given how strong he is at Catalonia under normal circumstances. But even so,
if he somehow claws that back, if he is 100% after the surgery, he's like riding the best he's ridden in like 10 years, and somehow closes that gap and defends his title.
It would be his greatest title. It would be even better than last year.
Championship ever.
We'll have to wait and see.
It would be the greatest single championship in the history of Grand Prix motorcycle racing.
Yeah.
Pecco Bagnaia came back from 91 down in half a season to beat Fabio Quartararo, and that was with Yamaha internally exploding in the back half of that year. Remember, you got to remember, Aleix Espargaro was a top contender for the majority of that season. He was within 20 points down the stretch. He was right in it until Japan.
That was the first really solid modern Aprilia. That was them emerging as a real contender. Yeah, I mean, the only part of that door that could still be cracked is that this is the first time Bez has actually put a sprint together. Both he and Martin have left points on the table. They might start taking points off one another at this stage. Because Jorge Martin might just be back.
More on that shortly, but yes, I mean, I realistically think this is done for Marc. I think the priority is get Marc up to 100%, see what you can do with this Ducati GP26, and then obviously focus your resources towards next year's 27 with the new regulations, and then figuring out how to spearhead that effort alongside Pedro Acosta next year.
The big problem as well is that Pecco's not taking any points off of anybody because he can't finish a race right now. Alex Marquez,
just poor.
Where are you?
Just a poor weekend.
What happened to our bikes?
It was gone. It was here for a fleeting moment last time out and then disappeared again.
I'm shaking Woody's 8-ball from Toy Story. Don't count on it when it comes to Marc Marquez's hopes of defending his championship.
Yeah.
Just to clarify one more time, no replacement this weekend in Barcelona. It's the old 10-day rule. You don't have to name a replacement for 10 days after being declared unfit. So there'll be just one factory, Ducati. At Barcelona, will be Pecco Bagnaia on his own. We'll see what happens at Mugello. It will likely be Michele Pirro if Marc isn't fit, as I'm pretty sure he clashes with World Superbikes that weekend. So I don't think Nicolo Budiga will be available for Mugello, but we'll wait and see.
It'll be one of the last appearances of Pirro that we see. I'm not going to turn this into a commentary about Michele Pirro's age and finished pace. I'm just bringing that because we recently had the news that no more wild cards in MotoGP.
That kind of got lost in the shuffle here. Yeah, next year, no more wild cards.
Woke nonsense, dog.
Why?
It is.
Okay, I know
trash.
why.
I know why. I just don't give a fuck. I'm mad about it.
Yeah, I suspect the reasoned logic from MSEG is the fact that they want official reserve riders for every team going forward. That's something they're very keen to push for 2027 on the simple basis of they don't want a lack of bikes on the grid. They don't want people to be pulling out and then teams not being able to dress a replacement for a weekend in case there's an injury. I don't inherently hate that idea.
Yeah.
I get it. And I don't have a huge problem with it, but you don't need to get rid of wild cards for that to happen. There's nothing wrong with a team running an extra bike, even if it's purely for development reasons. Isn't development the reason why we all do this? And no, I don't care what Simon Patterson tells me on Twitter that, when was the last time we had an exciting wild card? They're not here to entertain this. They're here to develop and
Danny
test the bike.
Pedrosa coming off the couch and putting his KTM on the podium.
And that was awesome.
And that was exciting.
Yeah, I get it that wildcards are not inherently entertaining, but they are a vital part of race development and bike development. And more testing in general, for me, is good. Like, you want the best these manufacturers can be. This feels to me like another way of the sport cutting costs. Because in an ideal world, you don't use a replacement, right? In an ideal world, you'd never have to use them. So,
right, but we're putting our riders through more and more races and giving them more and more opportunities to potentially get hurt and miss time at work. So that's why we have these replacement riders come in sometimes, unless it's the 10-day rule, in which case you don't have to bring them in. Well, put a pin in this conversation, because I feel like in our next episode, we're going to tread on very similar ground in a lightning round of mess. But that's next episode. Let's get to the present. Le Mans banner weekend for Aprilia. Jorge Martin went from 8th on the grid to lead at turn 2 during the sprint. Lead he wouldn't relinquish to take a record-breaking 18th sprint race win. And then on Sunday in the Grand Prix, he faced early trouble getting through the midfield. 10 laps in, he was nearly 3 seconds off the lead, which was taken by his Aprilia teammate Marco Bezzecchi. But Martin would keep his head down, take advantage of another crash from Francesco Bagnaia, and reel in Bezzecchi with insane pace, sometimes as much as half a second a lap quicker than his teammate. And Martin took the lead late on to win his first race in 588 days with Bezzecchi in second. It's not just an Aprilia 1-2 finish, though. It's not just Aprilia's first ever win at Le Mans, because on the podium in third, completing it for Trackhouse, Ayagura becoming the first Japanese rider on a MotoGP podium since, and you're not going to believe this, we were just talking about wild cards, Katsuyuki Nagasuka, 13-time champion of the Nagasuka Challenge, All Japan Superbikes, in 2012.
Valencia 2012, a very, very wet Valencia 2012 that weekend. But yeah, if you want to go, if you want to be super pedantic about it, it's the first podium from a Japanese rider in the dry since, I want to say, Shinya Nakano back in 2006. So yeah. Also, as Jason points out, the first podium finishing Grand Prix from someone to come from the Asia Talent Cup. See? Opportunity works, people. Yeah, what can you say? Aprilia had never won in France before. This was another one of those real stern test rounds, another track with very different conditions. We were expecting heavy rain this race weekend on the Sunday, which never actually landed. In the end,
no Unk still got a moment.
No Unk still got it. Johan Zarco's dream of back-to-back French Grand Prix went to shit very quickly. We were all sitting here waiting for rain, and it never quite landed. Quick side note, by the way, before we get into this, I've got to bring this up. I did not know this was a thing until watching over the weekend. They put in a new rule in the procedures for MotoGP now, where if there is no wet running in a Grand Prix weekend until Sunday morning, MotoGP will now have Moto3 and Moto2 get 10 minutes of sighting laps. They will delay the start by 5 minutes and then cut the length of the race by 40%. So the Moto3 race went from 21 laps to 12 laps. And then the Moto2 race, because it was declared wet, went from 22 laps to 13. It got knocked down to 9 anyway, because there was a red flag on the opening lap. Jorge Navarro crashed his bike on the home straight, which brought out a red. Race got knocked down to 9 laps. Congrats to Izan Guevara for the win there. Yeah. So in case you were worried about the smaller classes being diminished in this new era, there's another one for you. A way of cutting their races down to size to make sure they still could protect the TV window for MotoGP at 1 p.m. Fantastic.
All the doubters, the naysayers, and the haters. Absolutely correct.
Yeah, shout out to the haters.
Honestly, great call.
Oh, man. But let's rein it in a bit. Dre, I want to ask one thing. First, is Jorge Martin championship favorite? Second of all, am I hearing correctly that this run of form might save Martin's relationship with Aprilia?
I suspect it's already too late for the latter point of this. There's a lot, like, apparently, from what I've been told, Massimo Rivola, who's their CEO at Aprilia, is begging Martin to stay, which is awkward because Pecco Bagnaia is apparently holding on to a 4-year contract with Aprilia that he's already signed. They just can't announce it yet because, again, another small side note here, MSCG has blocked any and all contract announcements while this ongoing Concord negotiation continues. So, like, it's all done apparently in paperwork, but we can't announce anything officially until this situation is legally resolved. Great.
Could you imagine where Pecco Bagnaia ends up out of a ride for the 850s?
That would
This
be
is bullshit.
Dog.
I think VR
Kevin Walsh would die.
I think VR 46 would swoop in and save him if it really came down to that, but I don't think it will. As we've talked about on this podcast before, Jorge Martin is a stubborn motherfucker. If his mind is set on something, you are not going to convince that man otherwise. And it's ironic that you brought this up because let's not forget, it was this very round 12 months ago where Jorge, limping, still coming back mere weeks after being run over by Fabio Di Giannantonio in Qatar, punctured lung, 11 broken ribs. He limped into that Le Mans hospitality unit and told Massimo Rivola, I want out. I want
It's ironic, isn't it?
And because there was a performance clause in his contract that he thought was legally binding, that he could leave the team after a year if he wasn't top 5 in the standings. And that's what started that horrendously awkward legal situation where Martin...
Look, 12 months later, Jorge Martin's won the French Grand Prix. Is a perfect weekend on the board. In the sprint, win the Grand Prix. You're now only 1 point off the top of the table from your teammate.
I think there's one thing that a lot of people have forgotten about this. Besides the Jerez sprint, which was a technical error because Martin's front brake got jammed, Martin has finished every single racing session, Grand Prix and sprint, in the top 5. He has the best average finish of any rider in the field at the moment. He's not had a bad day yet this season of his own fault. He is crashing a lot on Fridays, but he's doing what Marquez was doing, figuring out where the limit is, and then when it matters, he gets his head down and takes the maximum available. This was, I think, the best of Jorge Martin's 9 MotoGP wins. This was a race where you wouldn't have given him a prayer 10 laps in. I mentioned that 10-lap milestone for a reason. That was the furthest back he was. He was nearly 3 seconds off the lead, which in MotoGP nowadays is a huge amount of time. 3 seconds normally means you ain't winning. And yet he picked off Pedro Acosta. Yes, by Bagnaia crash, and that was one less bike he had to overtake. But when he was in open air against Bez, he was taking chunks out of him. This is a Bez that had led 121 consecutive laps throughout the last 5 races of his win streak before we got to Jerez, and was leading a good, 22 of them here as well. Bez has become the sport's best frontrunner over the course of the last 6 months. When Bez gets the whole shot, he normally just wins. It's normally game over at the front. Martin picked him off. The best racer in MotoGP for 6 months basically got torn apart in the back half of this race. That's the Jorge Martin that Aprilia wanted to sign 2 years ago. That's the guy that won a world championship in 2024. And let's not forget, this is only his 12th weekend on this motorcycle. Incredible performance from Jorge Martin. That's why they signed it.
And that's what made last year so disappointing, that he basically he didn't have a 2025 season. And the few times that he was healthy enough to ride the bike, he was healthy enough to get on it and ride it around in races, but he was never healthy enough to be this guy that won a championship on a satellite bike, let's not forget, which I know some of your old coworkers said would never happen. At least one of them. Not to make him the main character or anything.
If nothing else, if nothing else, Jorge Martin already proved that you could win a world championship on a customer bike, something that hadn't really happened since Valentino Rossi technically did it in 2000 and
There's a big ass technically on there.
There's an asterisk. It was the factory team in all but name, but you know.
The technicality is that was not a Repsol blue and orange. It was in Peroni, Nastro Azzurro, yellow, and blue. That's the technicality.
Yeah, it's with Mick Doohan's old crew after Mick Doohan had his career ender.
I may or may not have made the point on the other MotoGP podcast I may have hosted when I get a little chance to get a word in here and there. I did mention, could you imagine the possibility of Jorge Martin taking the number 1 plate to a different manufacturer for the second time in 3 years?
I don't know if they'll take the number 1 plate again.
That's never happened in the modern era of MotoGP. Every other world champion but one stuck around after winning their world title. The only exception was Valentino Rossi in 2004 when he went from Honda famously to Yamaha. Everybody else at least stuck around with their current team for 1 more year.
I don't know if he's taking the number 1 plate, though, to his next chop. I'm going to be real. It could be just one of those bad juju moments.
Well, Martin took the 1 last time.
Yeah, and look what happened to him last year. Nothing went right.
Overall, just a sensational performance. That was remarkable from Martin. That's the Martin that can beat anybody in the world on his day. Let's not forget, he won here with Sprint and Grand Prix double 2 years ago, the last time he got to race at Le Mans. He does love it there. 112,000 fans cheering him on race day, by the way. Incredible attendance and turnout. The French Grand Prix, once again, best promoted Grand Prix weekend in motorsport. Superb job from the promoters over there.
I have one complaint. Camel, back me up on this. We have already strayed from God's light once. Now that Dunlop's global reorganization means that we are going to have a Goodyear bridge at Le Mans.
We had a DHL bridge, and it was proof that all that is good and holy in this world has been lost.
I know you have entitlement contracts for MotoGP's partners. Who asked for this?
This is enshittification at its most potent. To build on the Martin,
generate me some more AI-generated songs about dead podcasters or something, man. I'll take it over this.
It's unfortunate, and I mean, I'm saying it right now. I think Jorge Martin is favourite to now win this championship. I think he's only going to get better as the season goes on. He still hasn't got a base setup on this bike yet. He's winging this shit. And he's still figuring it out. He has got some issues still. I think the qualified is the biggest issue that Martin has right now. He's still not able to replicate his usual 1-lap pace on that bike yet. But his race trim has been excellent. Very quietly, very, very good. And it will only get better. But while I'm here, I also want to give some flowers to Ayagura because holy shit, this kid's quick.
That boy's still nice.
Look, I've always been a big fan of Ayagura. I was a big fan of him in Moto 2 when he was over there chipping away at things. His Moto 2 career very nearly got derailed over a horrible wrist injury, a title that he nearly, he totally blew the first time round when he tried a little bit too hard to go for the win when 20 points would have sufficed. And actually having the bravery to say no. I don't want to ride this Honda in MotoGP, which, you know...
Valid at the time. Extremely fucking valid.
In the last 2 Grand Prix weekends, the fastest rider in the back half of a race has been Ayagura. It happened in Jerez, and it happened here. This man... Like, I have always been a fan of Agura. I never thought he was going to be this. This is insane.
We got a little flash of it in the first round of last year, and we never really saw it again.
Yeah, it was a great start to the season. He just tapered off.
It was like falling off a cliff. He had that disqualification through no fault of his own with the engine software last year, and he was just never the same again. But this year, he has been so fast. Let's not forget, left a pile of points on the table earlier in the season with that drivetrain failure.
Yeah.
He should be higher in the standings than he is.
That was probably a 4th place at absolute worst, maybe a podium. I would be the first person, I know he's told the media this since, that he needs to figure out the qualifying and he needs to figure out the first half of the race because it's not working for him. But we saw it in that Le Mans race where he struggled to get past Fabio Quartararo for a good number of laps and ended up falling back to, I think, 8th or 9th at one point and having to come back.
Fabio Quartararo was only 7 seconds off the win on that piece of junk, I might add.
He has still got it, dude.
He's a fucking phenomenal rider. Holy shit.
That might be the best ride of the year in any class, and it's for nothing.
To put it into context, like as Cam quite rightly pointed out, Fabio Quartararo was 7 seconds off the winning bike. The next nearest Yamaha was Alex Rins, 25 seconds behind him.
Hey, all the Yamahas got in the points. Like, they will absolutely take that on the way up. Vic's chimed in saying, I hope the Yamaha check is worth the Gura being a back marker next year. They're not in a good state right now. It's absolutely worth it. And if you're coming in off of this wave of momentum and you have the chance to be a Japanese rider for a Japanese factory team, and you might get Jorge Martin, you might not. Who knows? Probably, maybe. Who knows at this point? It's all kind of weird, but
we know as much about that as we do about the World Endurance Championships BOP right now. And then we know nothing.
Oh, dear. I mean, like I said, I don't think Jorge Martin's going to change his mind on that. He's never done so before, so why would he fucking start now? But I need to stress this because this parlays into another neat point about this because Fabio Di Giannantonio, Ducati's leading rider, they was 4th again this weekend at Le Mans, just chipping away at it. He's allegedly going to KTM's factory team next year. Apparently that was signed, dotted, and delivered over this past weekend in France. Another blow for Ducati. Another one of their talisman riders over the last few years is being traded to KTM. Now, a lot of people are asking, well, Dre, why would Fabio Di Giannantonio leave behind a factory-backed GP26 to go to KTM? To which my response has always been the same. They're probably about to triple his paycheck.
Which is crazy because what we know about KTM is just like, they got the money for that. They're letting Pedro Acosta walk.
Then now they do. They allegedly have now opened the checkbook to Tech Free to say, no, you're sticking around. Here's some financial backing. You keep our engines going forward, which apparently will now let Gunther Steiner determine which 2 riders he wants on his team at Tech Free for next year, which is a little bit up in the air because Maverick Vinales has been injured. He's back this weekend at Barcelona. We got news on that today. It could be Maverick. It could be Brad Binder at Tech Free still, who's been having an awful run of form lately. Could be Colin Vaya in Moto2 as well. Keep an eye on that one. A KTM zone down there in Moto2, looking very solid down there at the moment. Could be one to keep an eye on as the weeks and months go by. But, like, I think people need to understand most satellite customer riders are not making a lot of money in MotoGP. Like Alex Marquez, I can tell you right now, is on about 400,000 euros for the whole season. He makes a lot of his bread in bonuses. It's all like win bonuses and performance bonuses. Like his actual basic pay is really not that much in the grand scheme of things. If you're getting a factory deal, it's going to be low 7 figures at worst, is what I've been told. It's apparently going to be low 7 figures for Digius, low 7 for Alex Marquez, win bonuses, and let's not forget, you get to be a Red Bull athlete. And one of the things that a lot of people don't talk about with that, recovery. You get access to Red Bull's facilities, all of them. Like, Paul Espargaro is a great example of this. If you follow him on Instagram, he actually went through a day of rehabbing his hand injury. That's why he hasn't raced. We had Jonas Volga this weekend at Le Mans. Good to see him back, by the way, his first start in 3 years. He gets access to all of Red Bull's recovery facilities. That's huge. That's a huge asset and aid to yourself as a rider. So these are all company perks that you don't get as a customer, So that's why these things matter. So yes, it may sound silly that Fabio Di Giannantonio is going to KTM and walking away from a very strong bike.
Yep.
There's a lot of financially prudent reasons as to why you would jump ship. Just worth pointing that out. Also, another big one before we get out of here as well. Davide Brivio seemingly leaving Trackhouse end of year. That's a surprise.
That is a big surprise. Brivio was the driving force behind Trackhouse building up into the MotoGP team that we see today. He's now won a Grand Prix as a satellite Aprilia team.
That was, I'd argue, Trackhouse MotoGP's first major signing. That was the one that got all the social media attention, all the career numbers, 5-time manufacturers champion, won those world titles with Suzuki back in 2020. I nicknamed and joked and called Trackhouse Davide Brivio Racing for some time because Justin Marks is a very much apparently hands-off kind of owner. That was Davide's team in all but name, and he's basically walking away to go to HRC.
Back to HRC.
Yeah, allegedly, HRC has offered him a role as a special consultant. Apparently, he's going to do a lot of the rider and basically vibes in the back of the Honda garage and making sure the riders are happy, working on the mechanics and the setups and things like that. But Alberto Puig is staying on as team boss for what it's worth. Honda do generally really like Puig. He's going nowhere anytime soon. They don't, but Honda do. So, that's allegedly a big boy move from the team boss situation. So Davide apparently heading over there to Trackhouse as well. Before we go as well, quick mention, Cam, how fucked is Ducati right now? We barely talked about Pecco Bagnaia. I mean, second in the sprint, that was promising.
What about
and then
Pecco Bagnaia? It's the set. So according to him, it's the same. Like, he comes out, he kicks, he crashes out, he's kicking shit on the way through onto the scooter to go back to the garage, and he comes out after the race and says, "Well, it wasn't human error." I'm like, "Oh, okay." He implies that this is the same issue that affected him last time out in Jerez, being unable to stop the bike. The fuck?
Something's going on back there, because for those who missed Jerez, Bagnaia couldn't stop his bike, basically, and he had to pull it over and stop because he felt like it was too dangerous to continue, basically. And Bagnaia was claiming it was the same issue again that caused him to tuck the front, which I think is basically as subtle a way as possible to say it was a brake failure of some kind. I don't know. Only they know in the back for sure. But you look at the current situation, Bagnaia down in the Grand Prix, Alex Marquez, complete nothing burger of a weekend. Digia once again chipping away and doing his best out there. Morbidelli, does he even exist at this point? I don't even know anymore. Aldeguer, still recovering from that broken leg, was again very quiet most of the weekend. Just there's not a lot of good coming out of the Ducati camp in general right now. It's quite alarming.
No, and that's the thing is, like, if you had someone in that, in that crew taking points off the Aprilias, you'd say maybe it's not all over if Mark comes back and is immediately on it. But no one is. Bagnaia is just going out sad from this team. Alex has gone from being superhuman last year to nowhere. It's worse than that, though. He was like, he's either the best rider on the grid, or he's like fourth best Ducati.
Crashed in qualifying, got back on it, qualified 10th despite only being 3/10 off pole, was nowhere in the sprint in 8th, and then crashed early on in the Grand Prix. It's just not
He's
good
not
enough.
finishing any races either.
Yeah. Like, Alex is topsy-turvy. Digi is the only consistent rider they've got right now, which is, we would never have guessed that in February. Yeah.
Never would have guessed that a couple of years ago, because you would have guessed he would have been out of the sport.
Yeah.
Also, Digi, making enemies this year, has now made a blood enemy of Pedro Acosta. I'm not sure that's a fight you want to pick.
Yeah, for those who missed it, he passed Pedro Acosta on the final corner of the last lap, and he looked behind him as he was going over the line. I think in Fabio's defense, he was probably just keeping an eye on it to make sure that Acosta wasn't going to counter him, because it was a bit of a late dive bomb at the end. But Acosta said, and I quote, "No one ever passes me while looking behind me. I'm going to get my revenge for that." I like Pedro. I like him a lot.
One of these days he'll win his first Grand Prix. One day.
That's what I was thinking.
That kid gets it. That kid gets it. I really, really like Pedro Acosta. MotoGP's back this weekend. It's a back-to-back doubleheader. We're at Barcelona for the Catalonia Grand Prix. Very knowledgeable track in terms of everybody knows it very, very well. Typically quite low grip. Alex Marquez dominated last year in Grand Prix fashion. You'd probably pencil him in as favourite under normal circumstances, but who knows?
Keep the fucking bike upright.
Yeah, big testing weekend for a lot of teams. Apparently there's going to be a lot of upgrade packages going around as well, because Catalonia is a typical testing weekend. I think there is actually a test after the weekend's over as well on the Monday, so a lot of things will be sticking around for that as well, and we'll be back to cover that on next week's podcast, so tune back in for some of that. We'll be back as well later this week for our IndyCar review from the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, and well, that was a hot mess to say the least, and not much of it was good. We'll do that next. I've been Dre Harrison. They've been Cameron Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Until next time, thank you very much for watching and listening. See you soon. Sign out.
Later, y'all.
These days, it's nobody's bikes.